In the year 586 BCE, the walls of Jerusalem crumbled. In the silence of the Babylonian exile between the waters of the Tigris and the Euphrates, the human soul did not merely seek a lost homeland, it sought an order within chaos. It is here in the trauma of displacement that the Western religious imagination crystallized one of its most powerful and misunderstood figures. Psalm 74:13-14 declares, "It was you who split open the sea by your power, you broke the heads of the monster in the waters. It was you who crushed the heads of Leviathan and gave it as food to the creatures of the desert." To the profanes, this is a song of triumph over evil, but to the Ophidian, this is the first veil of a deeper reality. The Hebrew expression used here is Tannîn, the plural of Tannîn. It does not denote a demon in the modern sense, but a primordial force, a stretch of being that precedes the structure of the world. Leviathan is not a creature to be annihilated, but the nourishment for those in the desert. It is the sacrifice of undifferentiated power that allows the birth of form. The introduction of the Tannîn within the poetic and prophetic layers of the scriptures, most notably in the Slamist tradition, demands an analysis that moves beyond the simplistic categories of later theology. This being does not occupy the space of a moral adversary. Rather, it marks the intersection between the non-manifested abyss and the necessity of cosmic structure. As our research elucidates, the Tannîn represents the very substratum of reality, the primordial form that divine intelligibility assumes to render itself present within the fabric of the world. To understand the Tannîn is to understand the nature of manifestation itself. It is the stretching out of the one into the multiplicity of the visible. This address, therefore, is not merely a historical survey, but a systematic investigation into the foundations of a rational and speculative monotheism. We shall proceed by peeling back the layers of later mythological distortions to recover the original multifaceted nature of the serpent monster. Through a rigorous philological restoration of the Imago Serpentis, we will demonstrate how the lexical ambiguity binding the abyssal sea monster to the terrestrial serpent is not a linguistic failure, but a precise doctrinal pointer. We move now from the silence of the exile to the structured clarity of the logos, seeking the living coherence of the one in the sinuous form of the first manifestation.
To proceed beyond the surface, we must confront the semantic mobility of the word Tannîn. The Ophidian doctrine highlights that the Bible is remarkably inconsistent in its use of this lemma. In Genesis 1:21, the Tannînim are the first animate beings, the great sea monsters. Yet in Exodus 7, when Aaron casts his staff before Pharaoh, the staff does not become a whale or a sea monster, it becomes a serpent. Two facts are noteworthy in this passage. First, the use of the term Mophet, prodigy, in relation to the appearance of the serpent, a theme that, as we shall later see, is common in Iliadic poetry. Secondly, the translation of the noun Tannîn as serpent. This translation would be supported by the fact that in Exodus 4, the same miracle is performed by Adonai. And there, regarding the transformation of the staff, the Hebrew term used to describe the serpent is Nahash. That this is an extraordinary manifestation is further confirmed not only by the already mentioned term Mophet, but also by the root shared by the noun Nahash and the verb Nihesh, to divine. This overlap between the abyssal and the terrestrial, between the monstrous and the reptilian, is the cornerstone of Ophidian ontology. The serpent is the interface between the invisible power of the divine and the tangible reality of the world.
While we have explored the profound connection between the noun Tannîn and the metaphysical principle of serpentiformity, we must not overlook the terrifying marine reality of these beings. In the ancient mind, the serpent is not merely a creature of the earth, but the sovereign of the unfathomable deep. To understand the Ophidian substratum, we must dive into the dark waters of ancient zoology, a realm where the boundaries between biology and myth dissolve into the spray of the salty sea. In the complex and often contradictory world of fantastical zoology, sea monsters occupy a category of their own. The Greeks grouped these beings under a single formidable term, ketos. The nature of the ketos is inherently liminal. It oscillates between the ichthys, the fish, and ther, the wild beast. The ichthos is a creature that eludes all taxonomic and zoological classification. It is neither fully animal nor fully divine, but a manifestation of the pelor, the terrible, the prodigious, and the terrifying. The marvel that defies the laws of the known world. The Latin world inherited this ambiguity through the correspondent term ketus. Much like the Hebrew Tannîn, the Latin ketus is a linguistic chameleon. It was used simultaneously to describe the actual massive denizens of the deep, principally whales, and the predatory sea serpents of pure myth. As the poet Ophidian wrote, these were sea monsters with great limbs, prodigious, marvels of the sea. Other authors sought to emphasize the raw, predatory violence of these entities. They moved away from the poetic ketos and adopted the term belua, the beast. Pliny the Elder himself employed this monstrous synecdoche, a view later solidified by Servius, who wrote, Ketos id est belluam marinam. The ketus is, quite simply, a marine beast. But if we search for a recurrent trait that defines the kete across the Mediterranean, we find it in their devouring disposition and attitude. In both Hebrew and Greek traditions, the ketos is the instrument of divine wrath. It is the anger of the abyss sent to reclaim what is owned to the gods. Consider the myth of Heracles and Hesione. Following a betrayal of the divine, Apollo unleashes a ketos against the Trojans. The city is forced into a grim ritual, the sacrifice of their daughters to appease the monster's insatiable hunger. Here, the serpent monster represents the depth of the mortal to the primordial, to the gods. The resolution of this myth introduces a profound mythology. Heracles does not merely strike the beast from without. Quite the opposite, he allows himself to be swallowed. He remains within the belly of the ketos for 3 days a descent into the darkness of the monster to emerge victorious. The motif of the virgin devouring monster is a thread that weaves through the entire Mediterranean basin. It is a symbol, a mythology, documented as early as the 6th century BCE on Corinthian and Attic ceramics. It reminds us that the serpent is not only the guardian of knowledge, but also the grave of the unprepared. To face the ketos is to face the devouring nature of the origin itself, a force that must be inhabited, as Heracles did, or as Jonah did in the Bible, before it can be transcended.
As we move from the Levant to the shores of Greece, the Tannîn sheds its skin and becomes the drākon. This is not merely a translation, but a philosophical evolution. The Greek word drākon derives from derkomai, to see clearly or to watch with intensity. In the Mediterranean substratum, the serpent dragon is rarely an aggressor. It is a guardian. It watches over the golden apples of the Hesperides. It coils around the tree in Colchis. It is the symbol of a knowledge that does not sleep. While the Abrahamic traditions attempted to fix the serpent in the role of the deceiver, the ancient Mediterranean recognized it as the embodiment of Eunomia, cosmic order and surveillance.
The evolution of the serpent principle was not a sudden rupture, but a slow, centuries-long metamorphosis. The imagery of the sea monsters did not vanish, it transformed, shedding its aquatic skin to become the serpent we acknowledge in later mythologies. This transition was driven by a unique philological phenomenon, the translation of the sacred scriptures from Hebrew into Greek, and finally into Latin. In the book of Job, the protagonist asks, "Am I a sea or a whale that thou settest a watch over me?" Here, the original Hebrew Tannîn underwent a fascinating philological journey. The Septuagint first rendered it as drākon. Later, Aquila revised it to ketos, seeking a different nuance, while Jerome eventually replaced the Latin draco with ketus for his Vulgate, aiming for a more literal fidelity to the Hebrew text. This translational and translational ambiguity is not a mere academic curiosity. Rather, it reveals the fundamental interchangeability of the ancient terms for serpent and sea monster. It gives us a unique philological picture where the dracontes and the kete share a common essence. Yet, a crucial distinction remains. In the ancient world, the dragon, as we imagine it today, simply did not exist. There was only one possible counterpart to such a creature, Leviathan. But Leviathan is a being of such singular individuality that he stands apart from all other Tanninim of the Mediterranean narratives. To find the origin of the medieval dragon, we must look to late antiquity. The multiplicity of serpentiform beings, each with a peculiar morphology and a diverse meaning, underwent a radical simplification. The catalyst for this transformation was, without doubt, Christianity. The turning point can be found in the Apocalypse of John. It is here that the noun drākon is directly associated with the diabolos. This marked the moment in which Christianity began to interpret the relationship between the Tannîn and the divine as a literal Chaoskampf, a war or a battle against chaos. By importing dualistic visions from other Mediterranean cultures, the early church introduced a rift into the doctrinal apparatus inherited from Judaism. In this new framework, the dragon began to be separated from the serpent. While the serpent occasionally retained positive characteristics in folk traditions, the Draco became an exception in patristic thought. In a world where every animal represented the principle of the oppositae qualitates, intrinsic dual qualities, the dragon remained anchored as a singular symbol of the adversary. Supporting this shift was a strategic philological preference. The early church favored the term drākon over the more common Greek ophis, serpent. Bishop Theophilus, in the 2nd century, even proposed a creative etymology to solidify this demonic association. He connected the word drākon not only to the verb derkomai, to gaze fixedly, but also to the verb apodidrasko, meaning to flee away from. He argued that the demon is called drākon because he has deserted God, for at the beginning he was an angel who fled his station.
We must be clear, Ophidism is not a spiritual movement oriented toward emotional experience or personal consolation. It is a theological and philosophical doctrine articulated in public texts and structured as an institutional religious confession. The serpent is not chosen for aesthetic or provocative reasons. It is chosen because it names a principle, the unity that unfolds without dividing itself. In our liturgy, the name God works within a serious make-believe system, as described by Kendall Walton. We treat religious language as a necessary artifact to facilitate an encounter with a being that is as real as it is beyond human description. The fullness of the serpent is found in the tension between the emptiness of the signifier and the absolute presence of the signified. The Ophidian Synodus exists to safeguard this coherence. We do not seek followers, we offer a public theological proposal. To those who wish to understand the serpent not as a monster to be slain, but as the very intelligibility of the world, this is your home. We remain disciplined in our resonance with what has been revealed.